share my screen. Okay, cool. So what do I mean by Maya's language? So anything that you do in Maya has a corresponding command. So when you're doing something even as simple as making a sphere, so if I click this button, it just made a sphere. You can see exactly what Maya is doing, at least with this type of command, by clicking this little button down here. It's the little gray button down near the bottom. You can also open this window by going to Windows and then Script Editor. Where is Script Editor? I think it's under General Editors. Yeah, right here. So what does all this stuff mean? So by default, what you'll have is just two tabs. One says Mel, one says Python. The Mel one should be empty, as well as the Python one should be empty as well. But up here, you can see there's just a bunch of gray text. And what this is actually a real-time readout of what's going on in Maya. So, for example, if I click here in the background, you saw that my sphere just stopped being highlighted. And what happened here is it said select-CL. That stands for select clear. If I click on the sphere, it says select R P sphere 1. And what that means is select sphere 1. So you kind of get a real-time readout of everything that's happening in the scene. So how can you use this to benefit yourself and speed up some workflow? Well, you guys are making controls. You guys are rigging things up right now. And I'm betting that you spend a lot of time making a control and renaming stuff and doing things that are very annoying to do over and over again. So if you kind of keep track of the couple lines of code that are important as you're going along, and then harness those and save them all in one spot so that you can click them and activate them with a single button, you can basically proceduralize making a lot of stuff. So what we're going to do is starting with a control. Usually we make a circle. So I'll click on the circle. And you can see here it said circle 0, 0, blah, 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 undo move command. Most of this stuff you don't need to worry about. The one channel that I'll recommend that you modify will be here where it says -R. So if I look at my circle and I come over here to my inputs, it says make nerd circle. You can see all of the default values that a nerd circle gets made with. This is similar to if you were to make a cube, for example. Polycube has the same thing. You can adjust different parameters on a polycube. You can adjust the width. You can adjust the height. And these are like special properties for each of these specific items. So with a sphere, or sorry, with a circle, you can adjust the radius. And so right now it's made with a radius of 1. So you can see it goes all the way to 1. We probably don't want all our controls to be that giant. So I'll start it at actually at 0.1. And see, that's actually what it does. It doesn't change the scale of the sphere at all. It just changes this parameter, which makes it a little easy to work. So how we can make that happen with script is up here. This is the line that made my circle. So you can highlight stuff, copy it, and then paste it here into this mel command. And you can see it turns certain things bright blue, and those are special Maya commands. Circle will make a circle. And then over here, all these things with little dashes, these are called flags, and those will change things on whatever that command is. So because this is a circle, it's putting it at world space 000, and then the one that I want to change is here, where it says -R. Instead of 1, I'll put 0.1. So now anytime you want to run whatever's here in your little editor, you can click this double play command and it will make the thing in your world. So let me move this out of the way a little bit, hit the double play and see it makes the little circle there. Cool. So that's our first command that we want to save. Then we'll rename it. We'll rename it something. Maybe we'll start with a right-left control because we make a lot of right-left controls. So I'll just say our default we'll even put FK in there for making FK. Yeah. And so then down here, you can see rename nerd circle 1 to our default blah, 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 blah. So then that, I'll just highlight that line, copy it, and paste it right below. And so this is a special my command, rename, and it says what thing you want to rename, which is nerd circle, and then the thing that you want to rename. Cool. So now I've got 2 commands going. The next thing that I would probably do is group this 2 times. So I'll select it, hit Control G to group it once, and Control G to group it twice. So now I have both of these things like that. I'll come back to my little editor. You can see it says do group and do group. And select. So I'll copy all 3 of those. Oops. Using Windows commands, Command C and Command V. So now I'm selecting my control that I just made and I'm grouping it 2 times. So then I should be at this step. Then I'll just rename this to our default FK Z group. That's what we do. And this will be our default group. Great. So we've got all 3 of these named right, ready to rock. I'll copy my renaming of group 1, copy my renaming of group 2. That. Cool. So now I have several lines here all in a row that should be able to produce this thing, which is a control that is scaled down because well, not scaled down, it's been resized. I resized the radius and then I grouped it in this fashion and I renamed the stuff. So let's see if that works. So if I hit play, and I shrink it down, you can see I've got all that made. And so it's a 1-button solution to making a control with the proper hierarchy that you want. And then what you could do is if you were making a knee control, what I would do is just recommend going into the search and replace, look for default, replace with knee. And now you have your knee control or your wrist control or whatever you want to do. So you're not having to constantly make a circle, constantly scale it down, constantly regroup it. So here, I'll go ahead and copy and paste this in the chat in case people want to use that. Yep.
So like, if you want to do that like multiple times, can you just like change the actual wording instead of when it says like rename, can you just change when you're renaming it to
So yeah, okay, yeah, good question. So say I wanted to make like 4 controls real quick. You would need to, do this once, bing, and then make sure to rename it before you hit that button again, because what it's going to do is try and make another one that's called default, and it won't let you because you can't name 2 things the same thing. So you need to rename it before you make a new one. The next version of this tool that would be like a really fancy thing would be to start to integrate UI. So when you would activate the tool, it actually bring up like a little dialog box. You could type in whatever name you wanted, and it would replace that when you hit the button, so it would automatically spawn with the right name. But what we'll do is just as a jumping off point. So up here, these are your shelf buttons. And a lot of times people like to have custom stuff, right? Custom things that they've made. So you can, at any point, highlight a bunch of mail commands, and then you can middle mouse click and drag up here, and you'll get this little default icon. You can right click that and say edit, and you can maybe give it a little label called like CTRL, something like that. And you could even use a special icon if you wanted to. We'll go into that in the next demo, but for now, I'll just save all shelves. So now, instead of having to keep opening up my little editor, I've got that saved on myself, and I can just click it and it will work each time. So that's basically how you can start to populate your shelf with a bunch of custom commands that you like to use all in a row. That's definitely how I started developing tools in Maya, just having like, 100 little commands all in a row, and then I could just press it and it would do stuff. So any questions on where to look for a mail command? So all of this, like anything I'm doing in Maya, is probably going to show up here just as a readout. And then you can copy and paste it into this window and save that command for later. And also modify certain parts of the flags to change what's going on. So the cool part is, like, I was working on another little tricky problem recently, and scaling, even these types of commands are like, these are right out here too. So you could do moving and scaling and rotating all as part of this like inline thing. So if you have a good mental model of what you want to happen in Maya, you could just have all these things happen in a row and it would be easily reproducible. So just keep that in mind as you're working. If you're identifying things that you're doing over and over and over in Maya, remember that, write it down, and maybe bring it to class and be like, hey, I want to make a button for this because this is really annoying to do 100 times in a row. Cool. We'll pause there. Any questions from Zoom? And we'll look at the chat. Going once, going twice. Okay. This is cool. It is indeed cool. You're correct, Austin. Thank you for acknowledging that. Yes, it's very much like Photoshop Actions. You can get a job just doing this if you really like this stuff. Tools development is a thing in bigger shops because making other people work faster is very beneficial for companies. So if you like problem solving like this is a very good thing to get good at. Also, it makes you faster if you develop your own tool set. So cool. Next up, so I guess I could email it to everybody real quick. Oh, actually, did you guys start? You guys started a chat, right? I think you might have. Let's switch over. Heck. Right here. All right, never mind. I will. Contacts that. Yeah.
Purple control code. Metal. Oh.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so next up, what we're going to look at is how to put a third-party script. So people have been making these things for years and years and years. Maya's been out since like 2006 or something like that. And it's been the same language since then, Maya Express language. And people have been making tools to speed up the process because Maya can't think of all the different use cases on their own. Let me go ahead and set my project to my project, and then I'll open up this demo. Let's see. So I think last time we were looking at kind of the couple key poses that I've got here. And so here you can actually see it's almost like little ghost versions of my character. So this was made using a special script. So something that 2D animation does, which is a really powerful technique to work through your animations, is called onion skinning. And it comes from because they draw on like really thin paper, and you can like slap that paper back and forth and maybe see the previous drawing. And so like onion skin because it's very, very thin. 3D, it's getting better, but there's still really no good solution in Maya for like saving this character or showing this character over time. There have been some improvements to the animation visualization. So there is this thing called the ghosting editor, but ghosting editor doesn't work with a skinned mesh, which makes no sense to me. Why that is still a thing in 2022. People have been doing this for forever, but you can put like a control or something like that in there. So if I add this in here, you can see there's like little ghost versions of that control later on. So if it's a object or a control, so if I had a sphere and I was animating a ball and you're actually putting keyframes on the ball itself, it would show up in the ghosting area. Great, this will be a perfect tool. And then you realize, oh, it only does, it doesn't do a skin mesh. So the only way, or still the best way, this thing came out in like 2010 or something like that. It's still, in my opinion, the best way to do onion skinning, quote unquote, in 3D. So the script is called BH Ghost. And if you wanted to find it, I guess I haven't pasted it into the shared directory yet, so you can't find it. Shared materials. Okay, cool. So BH Ghost. So this is what a separate file called a mel script or a mel file. It should end in .mel. And so that is a special thing that Maya is able to look at and be like, oh, it's a mel script. So if I were to come down here into my script editor again, open it back up, I could load in a little script down here by hitting File, Open Script, and then it will automatically open my default scripts directory. So this is where Maya looks for all scripts that have been installed. It's kind of annoying that by default, Mac hides this folder. Yay, Mac. So it's hidden under your library directory, which is not visible by default. I won't go into how to make it visible because it's annoying and stupid. The fastest way to get there is just copy this address, come up here. Oh, yeah. Cancel. Shrink this down. Click on the background, I'm going to go, and then go to folder. and then you can paste that address into the go to folder, and it will go to that folder, so you don't have to unhide anything. And once that's open, yours should look like, Jesus Christ. Okay, yours should look like this. Yours should be empty because you probably haven't installed it yet. If you have, then you are aware of all this, and that what I'm saying doesn't matter. So what you would want to do is go ahead and copy the BH Ghost folder from the shared directory, and then you can just right click and say paste, and it will put it in the scripts directory. Cool. Once it's in there, when you go to File, Open Script, you should see BH Ghost is there and it's available, which is great. So you can select that, hit Open, and then you have a whole new tab called BH Ghost right down here. It's got a bunch of fancy yellow text, which means this is code that doesn't run. It's usually put there to help you understand what's going on with the script. If it's written by somebody that knows what they're doing, they'll usually give you some hints on how to do stuff. And right here, look at this. To use, type BH Ghost semicolon without quotes. And then you'll be able to use the script. It's pretty dope. So if I were to, though, just hit the double play button like that, that is how it will then load it into memory. So before I did that, Maya wasn't aware of the script. Now that I've hit the double play button, it's looked through the code and it's like, okay, now it's available. So now that I've done that, I can come down here to Mel, go BH capital G Ghost, and then brackets, semicolon, and if I hit enter, I should see a new little window pop up. Look at that. I've got a BH Ghost window. And because I had this mesh selected when I activated the tool, it automatically added it here to my meshes. So you can see Ernie is there. If you didn't have anything selected, it would be empty. And so all you would need to do to add it in there would be to select the mesh, add mesh, and then you're good to go. So how to use this tool. It's pretty cool. This button will get rid of all of your current little ghosts. This button would get rid of a ghost if you were on a frame that had a ghost, because what it does is as your character is here in the scene, you can just hit ghost and it will create a little outline of the character at that moment in time. Like that. So what this is really, really, really useful for is creating breakdown keyframes. So I've been talking a lot about keyframes, like the key poses. And that's what I would imagine you're probably still working on if you're doing animation for this first part. You're creating your keyframes that aren't timed yet, but it's the main actions that tell the story. So the next set of frames that you would want to make are called breakdown frames. And those are how you link together two keyframes. So that would be a breakdown keyframe. And to make a breakdown keyframe, I highly, highly recommend using this tool, because you can go ghost and ghost, and then so I have my controls out here. So then here in the middle, before my character moves, I could create a new keyframe, but still have nice reference to where these other ones are. So you can get nice spacing and get things lining up correctly. This is incredibly useful for the thing that you may notice when you're flipping back and forth with your IK and your FK controls, which is that it pops and it moves all over the place because we don't have any special code to keep it in place. So if I were to flip my arm, for example, right now over to IK, it would go bonkers. But if I were to hit ghost like that before I flip it, so then I'll come over here to my right arm, IK. Now I have a reference that I can use to line stuff up instead of just guessing. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. So yes, BH Ghost is probably the most used tool that I still use for doing animation. It will speed up your workflow. It can solve a lot of, you're like, why does that look janky? And then if you do ghosts in a couple places, you're like, oh, it's because that one goes like this. It's just off to the side a little bit, and then you can correct it. Or, it's the spacing, it's way more weighted towards this side than this side. It needs to be more in the middle, so you can move it back a little bit. It's really, really, really helpful. So highly recommend going ahead, getting that saved into your scripts directory. And then just like how we made this little control up here, you could make a special button. And all that button does is, let's see, where's my DH ghost command? You just highlight that, you go like that, and say it's a null command. Edit, go to shelves, and DH. See all shelves. Now I've got that up there. I don't have to keep opening up that editor, and it will open up that menu whenever I need it. Does that make sense? What's up? Okay, cool. Keep in mind, I think the first time you open Maya, and if this is on your shelf, it may not run immediately because you will need one other line. So remember when I hit that double play button and I made it read the code? The special line to make it do that automatically is called source. And then you just give it the name of the file, which in this case is called DH ghost. I'm going to put a semicolon at the end of all lines of stuff. So I believe what this will do is it sources that script. So it will look in its scripts directory. If it finds a file that matches that, it will look through it, load it into memory, and then it will move on to the next line, which is the command to start up the tool. So now I don't ever have to go through the process of going open script, hitting the double play button, and doing all that stuff ever again, because I've got my Maya set up to do it for me. Does that make sense? Yes. Great. We'll look at the Zoom chat, make sure that I'm not getting any questions in this case. Anybody on Zoom have questions about this custom script and how to put it in the right folder, and then also source it so that you can run it? Going once, going twice. Okie dokie, cool. Let's see. Next up, double check. I had 3 things that I wanted to do today. What? It's hard to keep track of them in my head. So I'm going to look at my sent mail. Adding that. I thought I'd sent a big group where I talked about the 3 things, but I guess not. All right, so the next, get rid of all these. The next thing that I would like to do is first clean this up. Go. And talk a little bit about animation and these breakdown things. So I will show you kind of where I'm at currently. So I've got what I think are all the keyframes I need to get my character jumping and then grabbing that little edge. So this character is moving through space, and the keyframes that I find most useful for moving a character across like any kind of gap or just moving in space are all called the contact poses. So there are two really important poses when you're locomoting or moving a two-legged character. One is called the contact pose, which is right when the foot hits the ground, like, and then the other important pose is when you're passing. So one leg is passing the other one. So there's contact pose and passing pose. I find that the key pose that's the most useful, or the pose that's most useful, and I make it a key pose, are the contact poses. So here you can see I've got each time the character's foot would be striking the ground, and I added in this one just because it seemed like it was an important one to tell the story, where he's kind of crouching and jumping through and taking off, and then flying through the air, just one pose, and about to contact, like pretty close, hitting, and then sliding down just a little bit. So those are all my poses. So at this point, what I'd want to do is start to create a breakdown pose. And in this case, I'll start with my looking out and then down here. So getting from this pose to this pose, if all I did was right click, or so I highlight all my controls by selecting all my set numbers. If I right clicked and said auto, it would just do this. That's okay, but it's really not how you move. Like all the stuff is happening all at the same time. My controls are popping, like I'm going from FK to IK, and the arms lock like that. Now it's weird. And then, yeah, it like gets into that position. So what I would want to do is think about how to break down this movement into maybe a couple pieces. So first thing that I've noticed is like the hands are touching here, you're crouched, you're still weighted on this one leg. So maybe actually what I'll do is have a pose where I'm still straight up and down, but I'm maybe resting on my knee. So like I kind of go down to one knee and then I go out in front. So that's my breakdown pose. It'll be kind of going down, getting my hands closer to the ground. Maybe you can reach out with one hand and then the other hand. So first one I'll make is just crouch down. And go ahead and ghost. Oh, and I'll have here. So this slider changes the width of the stroke. Because this character is pretty small, you can probably dial it all the way to the left. You could also change the color. A lot of times I'll work with the white outline because it shows up a little brighter than the darker one. But sometimes I'll work with blue because it's pretty. All right, so the first thing I do when I create a breakdown pose is to make sure that I have a keyframe on every single control that is going to be used to begin with. So highlight all my controls and just hit S. I haven't changed anything yet, but it will just make your life easier to go ahead and put a keyframe on every single control right away. Yep.
Did you have it at this point?
No, so I have made a select set
Okay.
over there. Do you remember the select sets? Okay, cool. Yeah, so I right clicked and said select set. Cool, so now that I've done that, I'll get the main control and I'll work with this one first. Dip down, maybe get my knee in a place where this could start to be a thing. Ooh, this is tricky. Okay, so on this character, it has a couple special foot controls. One is to control being able to go up on the toe or back on the heel. It's a good one. Another one that I'm going to use here is called the shuffle. And so that can swoop it out like that, and that'll help from making it seem like the character's knee is going to snap, because this is a kind of extreme posture. Then I'll start to work with the hip a little bit so that I can kind of orient stuff a little bit better, unwind that. Not necessary. I'll actually zero that out and change some stuff here. There we go. This one's a more challenging pose because the knee, the way our controls are set up, it's very dependent on the foot and the hip, so it'll kind of shift around. It'll be kind of challenging to keep it in place, but we'll do our best. All right, so now that I've got my legs kind of in a little bit better spot, select both my spine controls and make them 0 to start with, so that I'm starting from kind of a neutral position. My arm. Make these all 0 too. A little more relaxed. Anytime I start animating and talking, I feel a little bit like Bob Ross, because you just kind of get that tone. Okay. I'm gonna save the current stuff that I've done by highlighting everything with S. Go forward to knife edge hands. I'm gonna try and find, I don't think I have any relaxed hands yet. So sometimes a nice thing to help you speed up is like to copy a pose from another keyframe and bring it on so you don't have to keep reposing. So far, I don't have a single pose where I've got a nice, just kind of neutral, relaxed hand where you're just more in a default position. So I'll need to make that. I think that's what I would like for this hand to be doing. So to get that, I will just do a big drag slope. Make sure the joints are turned off and mesh is turned off. Highlight everything. Deselect all the stuff I don't need. So now I just have my fingers. And make everything 0 to start. And deselect my thumb. And do rotate. Start to work these by rotating just this one axis. Got good start, and then I will deselect those, keep going, deselect these, keep going. Oh. So sometimes deselecting is the fastest way to actually get your selection, which is kind of a little weird, but a powerful way to it. You can see I have bad paint weights here at the hand. So what I would do if I were animating is I'd make a note. I wouldn't stop animating. I'd be like, fix paint weights in thumb flap or whatever. And because I am working with a reference I can just fix my paint weights in my rig and it would fix it in this too. There's an example of when I'm gonna be able to save some work. So, get that. Let's curl them a little bit. All right, so this is a pretty neutral, nice neutral hand. Select everything again. Keyframe. And then what I can do is hopefully save some work by just highlighting all my finger controls. Making sure that only the, oh, actually, sorry. So here's the trick. So if I wanted to copy this over to my other hand, the annoying part is because of a drag selection, I don't know which order Maya selected these controls in. So if I did that, right clicked on this keyframe and said copy, and I've copied the values in whatever order Maya just did because it was a group selection. And if I came over here and did that and said paste, it's not quite right because it didn't select them in the same order because it just like kind of was taking its best guess. So this is where having multiple select sets is sometimes really nice. It's a little bit more work up front, but I'll show you how it can pay off. So starting with thumb one, I'll just start to add to this selection by holding shift. And then say create set. This is my left hand. I'll do that same order that I just did here on my right hand. So someone. Cool. And then this, I'll call it right. So now, because I was very particular with the order that I selected things in, I should be able to copy and paste back and forth now. So if I right clicked on my left hand, so select set, came down here to the timeline, copy, and came over here to my right hand select set, did that and said paste. Oh no. Did my select set not do that? That's a bummer. Our thumb one, oh, thumb one. Oh well, I guess this was a bad demo. Sorry. Yeah, it looks like it's not working. That's very frustrating. Let's see. We thought that select sets would be able to handle this. What I usually do, or what I've done in the past, is to make little custom buttons up here, which does the select sets. So I would do my selection order. I was just showing you like that. All of those selections show up over here. And then I put them up here as a single command. And because I'm for sure selecting them in the right order, you should be able to copy and paste like that. Sorry. My selection set's letting us down. Whatever the case is, if I go ahead and set up this hand with a neutral pose, then I for sure have a right hand default pose set, which is really helpful. All right. That. Keyframe, so now both my left and my right hand, this is a keyframe I could use in other parts of my timeline if I wanted to. Oh. And be a little more slouch. Cool. Grab everything. Keyframe. So now I have like that. Making a little more sense to make a movement from here to get to here. This becomes an important part of the movement. And then even you might break down this a little bit where maybe the character rocks back flat on the feet. Like kind of regrounds and lets the arms come to a more natural position.
I think that was what generally recommend letting Maya
I test it out is what I do. Like I do that, I'll grab all the controls, I'll run the automatic, and if I'm happy with it, I'll let it go. But sometimes I'm animating on the twos if I'm like really wanting to dial in my animation to look good. And I recommend working this way when you're getting going in Maya. Like I think a lot of animation tutorials, when you look at them, they'll be like, all right, get the waist control, go into the graph editor, you know, turn this handle, do this. And like, that's great, but it is very disconnected from like the overall posture and the overall placement of the character in the world. And I think if you pay more attention to the overall shape that you're creating with your pose, you're going to end up getting better animation faster than just working on individual controls, if that makes sense. Like work on the whole character, act like you're drawing this character each time with your controls, and your character will look better than just like, yeah, I animated the waist and the feet and they're looking real good, but then the entire torso looks like a robot because you haven't put any fluidity or care into those controls. Okay, let me finish up this pose, show you what I mean. All right, so 0. It's me over the side. All right, and then make sure to, you remember my keyframes on my hand here? I should be able to copy this work. All right. copy and paste. Now I've got a nice relaxed hand. Don't have to reposition all that stuff. Oops. And actually, I've been very careful because I just talked about selection order. As long as you, so that Maya is aware of the order that it's selected, and because I'm putting it on the same thing, it's a little bit easier. You should just be able to come here and paste, and everything should work out fine. So that's a nice neutral position again. So if you're copying and pasting from the same control to the same control because you're saving your work, then you don't have to worry as much about the drag selection messing things up. Oh, elbow looks terrible. Bend in it. All right, cool. So now that I have it kind of rocks back, then goes down and then forward. So these are two breakdown poses to get to here. So this is the process I highly, highly recommend. This is where you're going to spend a majority of your time because you're really crafting these positions to feel balanced and centered and fill in all the gaps that normally, if you're talking about using the auto keyframe, so I just put a keyframe here on 0 and then 8, and you saw what happened where the character just kind of went and it mushed itself into position. Yes, I guess you get the idea of what's going there, but you're not really crafting a performance. You're not answering the questions on how does the character resolve the shifting of the weight and moving from one foot to another. So creating these two are really important breakdown poses for making your animation feel polished. The next step beyond that is when you start to do timing, but really don't move on to any timing or worrying what the animation looks like when you hit the play button. Just get the poses, the key poses and the breakdown poses working, filling in all the gaps. Then you can work on timing after that and it will be way better. Cool. So at this point, I want to go around and check in. And today I'm going to be a little bit more